Alright guys, welcome to your last Trig Tuesday video. In this video we're going to cover the points of the unit circle. So we're going to go all around the unit circle and figure out the x and y coordinate points for the unit circle. And remember, we call this thing the unit circle because the radius is 1 unit long. So if the radius is 1 unit long from the origin, we go out in the positive x direction, we're at 1, 0. But if we go in the negative x direction, we're in negative 1, 0. If we go up 1, we're at 0, 1. If we go down 1, we go 0, negative 1. Alright, so those are probably the easiest points to figure out on your unit circle, and you guys can get those real quick. The next points we're going to talk about are the ones inside the quadrants, and we're going to take them in sets of 4. Like the last video. The first 4 we're going to look at are the ones closest to the x-axis. So if you go on your x-axis and go up and down, it's the one you hit first. The next set we're going to look at is the one closest to the y-axis. So if you go to your y-axis and go left and right, it's the one you hit first. And then the last ones we're going to look at are the ones right in the middle. The ones in the middle for each quadrant. Something to keep in mind is that everything in the first quadrant, since we go out in the positive x direction and up in the positive y direction, everything in this quadrant is going to be positive and positive. Something positive, comma, something positive. If we go out in the negative x direction here, but up in the positive x, in the positive y direction, then everything in this quadrant, in the second quadrant, is going to be negative, comma, something positive. In the third quadrant, we've gone in the negative x direction, and we've also gone in the negative y direction. So everything here is something negative, comma, something negative. And in the fourth quadrant, well, we've gone in the positive x direction, but we still have gone in the negative y direction. So everything here is going to be something positive, comma, something negative. Alright, keep that in mind. The first ones we're going to look at, like I said, were the ones closest to the x-axis. Now the reason we're looking at this as a group is because if you remember from your degrees, this first angle here is a 30-degree angle. And the reason they're all related is because if you look at the x-axis and the lines that go out to the circle, they all make a 30-degree angle. So all of these triangles, if you add a height to them, they're a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Now if you remember from class, a 30, 60, 90 triangle, when the hypotenuse is 1, the adjacent side is square root 3 over 2. So that means that for this triangle here, the adjacent side is square root 3 over 2 in the x direction. So that means that this point here for the x coordinate is square root 3 over 2, because that's how much we've gone out. Also for this triangle too, down here, it's also square root 3 over 2, because that's how much we've gone out, and that's its adjacent side. So this is square root 3 over 2. But over here, in the second quadrant and in the third quadrant, where our x's are negative, the adjacent side for these triangles is also square root 3 over 2, right? That's the adjacent side, but it's in the negative direction. So for these guys, it's negative square root 3 over 2. So negative square root 3 over 2 for both of these guys. Alright, and then if you remember from the 30, 60, 90, the opposite side from the 30-degree angle is 1/2. So the opposite side here for these guys is 1/2. Opposite of the 30 is 1/2 for all of them. And that ends up being the height, or how we get our y coordinate. See, our height is 1/2. So for this point here, our height is 1/2, so our coordinate point for the y is 1/2. Over here, our height is also 1/2, right? That's the opposite of 30, so it's also positive 1/2. But here for the third and fourth quadrant, our heights are negative. It's 1/2 in the negative direction. So our y coordinate is negative 1/2. So for this one too, it's negative 1/2. So do you guys see a pattern here? Another reason they're all related is because all the points are kind of the same, except depending on what quadrant you're in, it's going to make the x or the y negative or positive, right? All right, let's take that same idea and let's apply it to the next set. This next set is going to be the ones closest to the y-axis, and the reason they're all related is because if we look at the line that goes out to the circle and the x-axis, that makes a 60-degree angle, right, for all of these. We have a 60-degree angle. And if we add a height to it, if we draw perpendicular, we get 4 triangles that are all 30, 60, 90s. Except this time the angle we're worried about is the 60. So if we look if we look at our 60-degree angle and we figure out what the adjacent side is, it's 1/2. So that means that the adjacent side for this triangle is 1/2. And that's how we get our x-coordinate. Then our opposite side, opposite of this 60-degree, is square root 3 over 2. So then the opposite side here is square root 3 over 2, and that's our height. That's how we get our y-coordinate, right? So our first point is 1/2 comma square root 3 over 2. Well, just like last time, we have those exact same points here, right? Our opposite side is still square root 3 over 2, and our adjacent side is still 1/2, except now it's just 1/2 in the negative direction. So that's how we get 1/2, negative 1/2 square root 3 over 2. Over here, our adjacent side, 1/2, is in the negative direction, and our opposite side, our height, is in the negative direction as well. So that's how we get negative 1/2 comma negative square root 3 over 2. And our last quadrant, our adjacent side is 1/2 in the positive direction. Our opposite side is square root 3 over 2 in the negative direction. So we get 1/2 comma negative square root 3 over 2. That's not so bad. Like I said, if you look at the first one and you just figure out whether the x and y's are going to be positive or negative, you can figure out the ones that are related to it, the ones closest to the y-axis. And also, if you notice, if I quickly just put the 30-degree, this is the 30-degree one. The coordinate point for this one was square root 3 over 2 comma 1/2. The one for the 60 is just them in reverse, 1/2 comma square root 3 over 2. So if you know the 30, you can quickly get the 60 by just writing them in reverse and then filling out the rest. Alright, last part. The ones right in the middle for each one. If you remember from your degrees that this angle here in the first quadrant is a 45-degree angle. The reason they're all related is because if you look at the x-axis and the line that goes out to the circle for all of these points, they make a 45-degree angle. And if you drop a perpendicular line to make a triangle for all of these points, you would get a special right of 45, 45, 90. And if you remember from class, the ratios for 45, 45, 90 when the hypotenuse is 1 is square root of 2 over square root of 2 over 2 for both sides, because it's an isosceles right triangle. So that means both of the legs are equal. So if we know that the adjacent side here is square root 3 over 2, and the height is also, the opposite side is also square root 3 over 2, or sorry, square root of 2 over 2, then we know that the first point here is square root of 2 over 2, comma square root of 2 over 2. Alright, so if we go to the second quadrant, our opposite side, our adjacent side is now square root of 2 over 2 in the negative direction, but our height is still square root of 2 over 2 in the positive direction. So our point here is negative square root of 2 over 2, comma square root of 2 over 2. The third quadrant, well, still the same triangles, still the same ratios. So our adjacent side is negative square root of 2 over 2. And then our height is now in a negative direction, square root of 2 over 2. So that's how we get these points. And then lastly, here our adjacent side is square root of 2 over 2 in the positive direction, but then our height is negative square root of 2 over 2 because we've gone in the negative direction. So that's how we get these last points. So once again, if you know the first quadrant, just figure out whether the x and y's are negative for each of the other quadrants for the ones that are related, the ones right in the middle. Alright, so let's look at the whole unit circle for the points. Like I said, just quick reminders just to wrap it all up. If you know the first quadrant, you just figure out that everything in the second quadrant is something negative and something positive. Everything in the third quadrant is something negative and something negative. And then everything in the last quadrant, oh look, that makes a little funny face. Oh, actually this one's like winking too. Okay, anyways, everything in the fourth quadrant is something positive and something negative. Okay, so if you know what the ratios are in the first quadrant by using your right triangles, you only have to know two right triangles, special rights, the 36-90 and the 45-45-90. You can figure out these ratios, or sorry, these lengths for the x and y, and then you can fill in the ones that go with them. Also, if you know the 30, you ought to know the 60 because it's just the opposite. So hopefully that helps you. If you have any questions before your Trig Tuesday, feel free to at me or leave a comment under the video or do whatever you like. Get in contact with me, ask me in class, and hopefully this will get you, these 3 videos will get you 100% on your Trig Tuesdays. Thank you guys.